Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back through the fog of time, into a world of flickering gaslights, horse-drawn carriages, and the soft rustle of starched petticoats. You're in the heart of Victorian London, where sleep doesn't come easy and insomnia isn't just a medical curiosity, it's practically an aristocratic badge of honor. You stroll past grand stone facades and smoky lamplit windows, where the wealthy whisper about their sleepless woes between spoonfuls of jelly and jellied eels. You're probably not going to survive this century without at least one doctor diagnosing you with nervous exhaustion. And yes, that's an official term. But hey, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your location and the time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're stepping into a bedroom, coal fire hissing gently in the grate, moonlight stretching in silver ribbons across the worn floral wallpaper. The air smells faintly of oil and dust, and the mattress under you is stuffed with horsehair and a little too much ambition. You've had a long day of being terribly Victorian, corseted, tea-soaked, and vaguely scandalized by someone's exposed ankle. But now, you should be sleeping. Only, you're not. Sleep doesn't come easily in 19th century Britain. The Industrial Revolution may have transformed society, but it wrecked bedtime. Factories blared through the night, train whistles screamed like banshees, and gaslight, so modern, so chic, poured its flickering glow into bedrooms that once relied on the darkness of candlelight. Night no longer meant silence or stillness. You lie in bed and listen to the horses clip-clop on cobblestones outside, your ears too tuned in, your brain too busy. The soft creak of the floorboards above, the wind sneaking through rattling window panes, even the distant hum of street performers still playing near Piccadilly, it all keeps you awake. And yet, oddly, sleeplessness becomes fashionable. Especially if you're wealthy. The more refined your sensibilities, the more susceptible you are to being overwrought. The nervous upper classes begin romanticizing insomnia the way one might romanticize catching a chill in the Alps. It's the sign of a thinking mind, you're told. After all, only dullards sleep soundly. Still, you try to find help. So you visit the doctor. He's got a massive mustache, a grim expression, and probably a half-empty bottle of port in his desk drawer. He asks if you've been worrying too much about your poetry, your social calendar, or your latest embroidery sampler. Then, he recommends something vague like fresh air or less reading. He might also suggest a quiet walk in the country, though never unchaperoned, of course. And if you're a man, well, maybe you've been reading too many philosophical treatises by gaslight, or working too hard in the bank, or worrying yourself sick about empire. Either way, your sleeplessness is considered a minor tragedy, but also, perhaps, a mark of your noble temperament. Downstairs, in the drawing room, your housekeeper has been told not to disturb you past 9 p.m. You don't want any disruption to your fragile bedtime routine. The butler tiptoes past your door like he's dodging landmines. But it doesn't help. Because your sleep problem isn't just about noise or light. It's about living in a world that's rapidly changing. Steamships, telegrams, social mobility, and scandalous new ideas are keeping everyone's brains overstimulated. And you, lying there in your featherbed, are feeling all of it. Featherbeds, by the way, are a Victorian status symbol. The lower classes might sleep on straw pallets, but you've got layers of down and satin, and still, your back hurts, and your brain won't shut up. You toss and turn while wondering if Queen Victoria ever had nights like this. She did. But instead of a sleep podcast, she had a small army of attendants and an opium-based tonic. You sigh. You reach for your bedside candle, which smells vaguely of beeswax and regret. You consider reading, but that might overstimulate you further. After all, your doctor warned you about the dangers of late-night literature. Historians still argue whether Victorian insomnia was truly more prevalent, or just more written about. Some say sleeplessness rates haven't changed much at all, others claim industrialized life created a whole new epidemic. But whether it's anecdotal or epidemiological, the Victorians certainly obsessed over sleep. They wrote treatises, conducted sleep experiments, and built strange contraptions to help the weary rest. And yes, some of them were wonderfully bizarre. One fringe thinker even suggested that aligning your bed with magnetic north would help channel the Earth's natural energies into your nervous system. So you lie there, wondering if your bed is pointing the wrong way, if, perhaps, your brain is just misaligned with the planet itself. There's something oddly comforting in that thought. At least it's not your fault. So you wrap the heavy quilt around your shoulders and stare at the ceiling. You listen to the ticking of the mantle clock, each second slower than the last. And finally, just maybe, you drift off. But don't worry. This is only the beginning. There are stronger brews, stranger remedies, and sleepier scandals to come. You wake up groggy. Not because you actually slept, but because your housemaid has brought in the morning tea tray and opened the curtains like she's auditioning for a play called Attack on Sleep. Sunlight stabs you in the eyes through the thin muslin curtains. Another night gone, another day where you'll pretend you're fine, truly, and try not to yawn during the bishop's sermon later. So what do you do when counting sheep fails, your bed feels like a bag of angry cats, and your physician gives you nothing but stern eyebrows? You do what any respectable Victorian does, you turn to the apothecary. And oh, what a cornucopia of sleepy-time potions awaits you. You shuffle through the cobbled streets in your sensible boots and visit a narrow shop that smells like dried herbs, licorice, and mild despair. Inside, glass jars glint on wooden shelves, each one promising calm, sleep, or possibly death, depending on the dose. You don't ask too many questions. That's just not the style. Instead, you ask for the latest remedy for sleeplessness and, voila, you're handed a small bottle with a slightly too cheerful label, laudanum. Ah yes, laudanum. The go-to cure for everything from insomnia to menstrual cramps to, let's be honest, existing. A delightful mixture of alcohol and opium, laudanum is the Victorian version of a NyQuil martini. You take a few drops on your sugar cube. It tastes like warm bitterness soaked in melancholy. And then, slowly, gently, the fuzz begins. Your muscles relax. Your thoughts blur at the edges like watercolor bleeding into damp parchment. The ceiling becomes interesting, the pillow suddenly divine. You may not fall asleep immediately, but you definitely stop caring that you haven't. Still, there's a tiny problem with laudanum. It's addictive. Like, aggressively addictive. But this is 1853, you're not worried about that. Neither is your doctor, who keeps a bottle in his desk drawer labeled, for professional use only, which is code for, mid-morning pick-me-up. Historians still argue whether Victorian physicians genuinely believed laudanum was harmless, or if they simply decided not to look too closely. Either way, nobody's putting warning labels on anything. The stuff is so widespread that you start recognizing the signs in others: glassy eyes, oddly poetic conversation, and a fondness for lying on fainting couches like they're auditioning for a painting. Even children are given diluted doses. Teething infants receive Godfrey's cordial, which is basically opium syrup with a nice label. You can't sleep, your toddler's crying, you both just go on a chemical vacation. Then there's opium tea, a slightly more genteel option. You're handed a delicate cup with floral trim, and inside it, a blend of chamomile, valerian root, and powdered opium resin. Steeped just long enough to dull the mind but not long enough to end the evening with existential dread. You sip it slowly, watching the steam curl like dreams escaping through the ceiling. The warmth settles in your chest and curls into your belly. Of course, some remedies are more natural. You might be offered a tea of hops and skullcap, two plants with sedative effects. And if you're in certain circles, someone might whisper about the French method, a tincture made of poppy heads and wine, taken at dusk and forgotten by midnight. But the Victorian love of chemical calm goes deeper than tea and tinctures. You hear stories, whispers, really, of artists who take their laudanum by the spoonful and then wander the city at night, wrapped in cloaks and philosophical torment. Sleep? No thanks. They've transcended that need. And then, inevitably, you read the penny dreadfuls, the cheap, scandalous fiction that sells by the cartful, about women who overdose and float into eternal sleep in crumpled ball gowns, clutching empty bottles and love letters. Yes, even tragedy becomes fashionable. The line between cure and poison is gloriously blurry. You, of course, are more careful. You measure precisely. A quarter teaspoon, no more. Probably. You keep the little bottle on your nightstand, next to your embroidery hoop and your brass alarm clock. And the dreams, when they come, are deep and strange. You wander through endless gardens. You hear music you don't recognize, smell flowers that have never existed. It's not quite restful, but it's something. Still, every now and then, you wonder, is this sleep real? Or are you just sedated into silence? Some thinkers of the time begin asking this very question. Is sleep something the body must work to achieve? Or can it be induced like a chemical trick? One fringe theory proposes that sleep is not even necessary, that with the right tonics and enough willpower, humans can adapt to living without it entirely. The theory doesn't catch on. Mostly because everyone's too tired to try. Still, your laudanum nights continue. You sip. You sigh. You sink. Until, one day, the bottle's empty. And your body, bless it, refuses to sleep without it. You don't panic, not at first. But then come the headaches. The restlessness. The sense that the air is too loud and your own skin is too tight. You're not just sleepless anymore. You're needing. It's in this moment, somewhere between withdrawal and revelation, that you realize, maybe you need a new method. Something gentler. Something a little less opium-y. But don't worry. The Victorians had plenty of weird options. You've given up the laudanum. You poured the last few drops down the drain with trembling hands, the scent lingering in the air like a ghost of your former sleep. Now you lie in bed, raw with wakefulness, staring at the ceiling and wondering how the stars can be so bright and so rude. It's time for something more scientific. Or at least something that claims to be. Enter the thrilling world of Victorian electrotherapy. Because when tea fails, and tinctures betray you, nothing says, "I'm trying," quite like strapping yourself into a device designed to zap your brain with mild electricity. You head to your local practitioner of nervous ailments, a man with wire-rimmed spectacles and suspicious enthusiasm. His office smells like ozone and lavender sachets. There's a heavy brass machine in the corner that hums faintly, like it's thinking about becoming a villain. Electrostatic stimulation, he says with a proud nod. Very popular. Clears the mind. Calms the spirit. Restores sleep. You sit. You're not sure what you're consenting to, but it's Victorian England, you trust the man with the mutton chops. He produces something that looks like a hairbrush had a baby with a car battery. This is the Pulvermacher chain, he explains. It wraps around your neck like a fashionable strangulation device and sends tiny pulses of electricity through your nerves. The first jolt makes you flinch. It's not painful, just weird. Like being poked by an ambitious static shock. Your arms tingle. Your jaw buzzes slightly. And suddenly, the fog in your brain shifts. Does it help you sleep? Hard to say. But at least you're distracted from the not sleeping. Victorians were obsessed with the nervous system. They believed insomnia came from nervous exhaustion, a term that basically meant your soul is tired, and your body agrees. Electricity, they argued, could recharge your nerves like a dying lantern. Historians still argue whether these treatments had any real benefit, or if they just offered the comforting illusion of control. But people paid for it, swore by it, and kept coming back for more jolts like clockwork. There were electric helmets, electric belts, and even electric air baths. You step into a wooden booth, strip down to your underclothes, and stand there while ionized air swirls around you, gently buzzing your skin. The effect is somewhere between refreshing and ridiculous. You're half chilled, half charged, and fully aware that your neighbors think you've lost your marbles. But it's not just zapping and tingling. There's a more sinister cousin to these treatments, something called the thoracic current. It's stronger, more assertive. The kind of electricity that makes your muscles jump involuntarily. And yes, some doctors used it on people's heads. You hear whispers of a sleepless barrister who had electrodes placed at his temples and reported dreaming of blinking stars and melting clocks for days afterward. Did it cure him? No one's sure. But he wrote a rather compelling poem about it. Some practitioners go even further. You visit a spa and bath where therapeutic lightning is advertised as a cure-all. It's just a fancy name for being lightly zapped while lying in a damp robe, but the brochure is convincing. You lie back, feel the tickle of the current across your chest, and try to pretend this is normal. But even within this strange realm, there are skeptics. One newspaper columnist refers to these therapies as galvanic nonsense and accuses doctors of tickling patients into submission. Another, more poetic, describes it as the art of shocking people into believing they feel better. Still, there's a hopeful undercurrent. People want to believe in the healing power of science, even if the science is mostly knobs, wires, and optimism. And as strange as it sounds, some patients do sleep better afterward. Maybe it's the placebo effect. Maybe it's the comfort of attention and ritual. Or maybe, just maybe, there's something about getting a little buzzed by lightning that calms the human brain. You lie in bed that night, head still humming faintly from your latest appointment. The world seems quieter somehow, your limbs slightly heavier. The old restlessness is still there, like a houseguest who's overstayed their welcome, but it's dozing in the corner now. Your thoughts drift to other inventions, devices too experimental for even your bold Victorian soul. One inventor claims he can induce sleep with sound waves that mimic the brain's natural rhythms. Another proposes a hat filled with chilled mercury coils, meant to cool the overactive mind. You make a mental note, do not try the mercury hat. Still, the experimentation continues. And you doze. Not deeply. Not peacefully. But enough to make it to morning. You dream of lightning in jars, wires coiled like snakes, and a soft voice saying, you may feel a slight tingling. It's not restful. But it's progress. You've tried the tinctures. You've been mildly electrocuted in the name of wellness. And yet, the nights remain long, your thoughts still race like horses at Epsom, and your mattress seems filled with lumpy regrets. So what now? You need something a bit more atmospheric. Less invasive, more elegant. Something that doesn't involve voltage or opium dreams. You turn to your surroundings. Specifically, your bedroom. Or, as it will now be known, your sleep sanctuary. Welcome to the age of Victorian sleep hygiene, though no one calls it that yet. Victorians believed that your environment was a reflection of your moral character. A cluttered room hinted at a cluttered soul. And so, the bedroom was expected to be a shrine to virtue, order, and deep, uninterrupted slumber. You begin your transformation by banishing every speck of dust. Your housemaid swats at cobwebs while you obsess over the placement of your bed. It must face east, to catch the rising sun, or west, to avoid it entirely, depending on which magazine article you last read. Your mattress, a sack of horsehair and hard-earned humility, is fluffed and flipped. Feather pillows are replaced with firmer, more healthful options, filled with wool or millet husks. You throw open the windows. Air, it turns out, is the miracle cure you've been ignoring. Cold air, especially. One doctor claims that stale bedroom vapors are the root cause of most sleeplessness. So now you sleep with the window cracked open, even in winter. Even when your teeth chatter like a haunted typewriter. There's an ongoing debate among your friends, is fresh air the key to rest, or an open invitation for tuberculosis? Historians still argue whether the obsession with ventilation did more harm than good, especially in cities thick with soot and horse manure. You place a sprig of lavender beneath your pillow, just like the etiquette manual suggests. Lavender calms the nerves, they say. You're skeptical, but it smells nicer than your neighbor's coal smoke. Next comes the noise problem. You live on a street that never quite sleeps, clattering carts, clopping hooves, and the occasional drunk soprano trying to remember the words to Rule Britannia. To solve this, you invest in ear trumpets, oddly elegant cones that can be repurposed as rudimentary earplugs. You also hang heavy velvet drapes, supposedly to muffle sound, but mostly to impress your cousin Margaret. Some inventors offer mechanical solutions. You see an advertisement for a nocturnal silence machine, a box that produces a soft, repetitive ticking to drown out city noise. It's like the ASMR of 1870. One fringe thinker even proposes the idea of monotony therapy. He suggests listening to the same sound, tick, 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 for long enough will hypnotize the brain into sleep. You try it. You lie there for 2 hours, contemplating time, mortality, and whether you've made a huge mistake. Still, it's not just what you hear or smell, it's what you wear. Enter, the sleeping costume. Victorians believed in dressing for bed with nearly the same seriousness as dressing for dinner. You own at least 3 nightgowns, each with varying degrees of frill. There's the practical cotton one for regular nights, the lace-trimmed flannel for winter, and the embroidered muslin for those rare occasions when you might be caught dreaming handsomely. Nightcaps are a must, not just to keep your head warm, but to protect your thoughts, apparently. One doctor insists that the mind cools through the scalp, and another claims that dreams escape through the top of the head like steam. Best to keep that covered. You slip into your sleeping garb. It feels ceremonial, like preparing for a journey. Then there's the matter of bedtime rituals. You're advised to engage in calming activities, reading the Psalms, sipping warm milk, avoiding any mention of France. You light a beeswax candle and read a chapter from a book titled Sensible Living for Sensitive Ladies, which is mostly about how not to feel too many things. You place a glass of water by your bed. You tuck your feet under the quilt, then over the quilt, then under again. You adjust the curtains so they're just so. And then, when all else is ready, you perform the strangest part of all. You lie very, very still. Victorians believed movement after lying down could stir the humors and awaken the nerves. So you train yourself to go rigid. Arms by your sides. Eyes gently shut. Breathing slow and silent. It's like playing dead, but prettier. And there you stay. The room dark. The window cracked. The faint scent of lavender. The cotton of your nightgown cool against your skin. You try not to think. But of course, you think about not thinking. You think about the flickering candle. About the chimney sweep who tripped earlier. About whether sleep posture really matters. Some guides insist you sleep on your right side, as it promotes better digestion. Others say left, for optimal circulation. A few radical types suggest sleeping upright in a specially designed chair. That last one feels more punishment than rest. Still, tonight, there's something different. Maybe it's the ritual. The fresh air. The quiet. Maybe it's your new pillow, firm and unforgiving. But you doze off. Not with drama. Not with dreams. Just a slow descent. Like slipping into warm water. No poppy syrup. No lightning hat. Just you. And the room. And the stillness. And finally, sleep. Morning comes with the rude interruption of birds. Not cheerful chirping birds, but the insistent kind that sound like they're practicing opera scales on your windowsill. You sit up, unsure whether you slept or simply time traveled through your own exhaustion. Still, there's a small victory in the air. You feel rested-ish. Or at least you're not hallucinating cobwebs that whisper, sleep is a lie, anymore. But this isn't the end of your sleepless saga. You're only just beginning to appreciate how deeply Victorians chased rest like it was a fox hunt for the soul. Now you turn your attention inward. Not to your bedroom, your clothes, or your voltage levels, but to your mind. Because what if insomnia isn't a physical problem, but a spiritual one? Welcome to the golden age of Victorian moral insomnia. You sip weak tea in the drawing room, listening to your Aunt Agnes explain that only the wicked lie awake at night. You blink. She means it. And she's quoting a reverend. Turns out, a surprising number of Victorian doctors, pastors, and poets believed that sleeplessness was a symptom of guilt. You weren't just tired, you were troubled. The idea had traction. After all, a clear conscience sleeps soundly. So if you're awake at 3 a.m., pacing and whispering forgotten Latin phrases into the dark, well, what have you done? You start wondering if you're a bad person just because you skipped evening prayers. Or because you once insulted someone's cravat in a moment of passion. There are pamphlets, sermons, and self-help books galore. Titles like The Sin of Wakeful Thoughts and Spiritual Remedies for the Restless Mind flood the shelves. One popular tract claims that every sleepless night is a warning from your soul. What torments thee now, it asks, that thou might not find rest in thy pillow? You're fairly certain the answer is, your neighbor's piano practice, but you keep that to yourself. Still, you can't help internalizing some of it. There's a moral weight to not sleeping. It starts subtly. You feel a flicker of shame when you admit to someone that you were up all night again. They tilt their head, offer tea, and suggest perhaps your thoughts are too loud. Another person hands you a prayer card for peace of heart. Suddenly, your insomnia has become a moral failing. You try to combat it the only way you know how, with rituals of repentance. You start confessing minor misdeeds in your diary. You apologize for bumping into someone on the street 3 years ago. You consider attending Vespers even though you're not entirely sure what Vespers are. One clergyman writes about conscience-purging prayers for insomniacs, verses specifically designed to unbind the knotted soul and soothe the agitated mind. You try one. It involves 12 lines of rhyming repentance and a promise to forgive anyone who's ever stepped on your foot. Does it help? Maybe. A little. Or maybe you're just exhausted from all the spiritual bookkeeping. Historians still argue whether this association between sleeplessness and guilt did more to help or to harm. On one hand, it gave people tools, rituals, prayers, reasons. On the other, it pathologized restlessness, turning a basic human struggle into a character flaw. You imagine someone today telling their therapist, "I can't sleep because I'm a bad person." The therapist would nod thoughtfully, then maybe ask about your childhood, not your last confession. But in the 1800s, the line between medicine and morality is thin and easily smudged. Some doctors prescribe prayer as part of a treatment plan. 20 minutes of scripture before bed, they advise. Followed by silence and self-reckoning. And some patients do find peace in this practice. There's the story of a widower who, unable to sleep for years, finally rests after writing letters of forgiveness to people he hadn't spoken to in decades. Whether it's grace, closure, or simple emotional unburdening, it works. There are others who try a more literary path. You attend a meeting of the Restful Readers Society, a group of well-meaning eccentrics who believe that reading morally upright fiction can cleanse the mind before bed. You borrow a copy of The Chaste Triumph of Sister Prudence and try to read it by candlelight. The plot is slow, the sentence is longer than a train schedule, and the protagonist never even holds hands with her fiancé. But, your eyes begin to droop. You yawn. You doze. Moral fiction, you decide, is the best sleeping pill you've encountered so far. You make a habit of it. 10 pages of chastity. A quick prayer. A promise to try harder tomorrow. And the occasional burning question, are the sleepless ever truly blameless? In time, you come to a quiet truth, maybe sleeplessness isn't always about guilt. Maybe it's about being alive, fully, painfully, gloriously alive in a world that never quite stops buzzing. Even so, you'll keep whispering your prayers, just in case. And if sleep comes? Well, perhaps it means you've been forgiven. So far, you've tried air, prayer, posture, and poetry. You've spiritualized your insomnia and moralized your mattress. But let's say you're still wide awake at 3 a.m., staring into the dark like it owes you answers. What now? Now, you get a prescription. From someone with a cane, a cravat, and a very convincing degree in Latin. You head into the hazy world of Victorian pharmaceuticals, where your doctor might be a hero, a hazard, or someone who once mistook cough syrup for wallpaper polish. There's a clatter of glass as you open your cabinet of cures. It's filled with neat little bottles, all elegantly labeled in cursive, and all slightly terrifying. Victorian druggists were nothing if not ambitious. If it could be boiled, bottled, or brewed, it probably ended up on someone's nightstand. And now you hold one such bottle in your hand, chloral hydrate. First synthesized in 1832 and popularized as a sleep aid by the late 1860s, chloral hydrate is the superstar of Victorian sedatives. Clear, tasteless, and deceptively mild-looking. They called it a knockout drop, with all the fondness of people who didn't yet understand the concept of addiction. It works fast, like, fall asleep before your head hits the pillow, fast. Queen Victoria's personal physician, Sir William Gull, swears by it. And when you take your first teaspoon, so do you. You sleep. Deeply. Dreamlessly. Maybe a little too deeply. You wake up disoriented and vaguely concerned that you might have missed a whole day. The room feels distant, the air thick. It's like waking up underwater. But you slept. And to a sleepless Victorian, that's worth more than clarity. Of course, there's a catch. There's always a catch. Chloral hydrate has a pesky little problem, it's addictive. Use it too often and your body demands it. Skip a dose and your insomnia returns with vengeful flair. Plus, it pairs dangerously well with alcohol, creating what doctors ominously call sudden fatal sleep. Historians still debate whether chloral did more good than harm. Some praise its role in bringing genuine rest to desperate minds. Others blame it for creating a whole new class of functioning addicts, tired souls trading sleep for safety. But chloral isn't alone on the shelf. Oh no. It has company. Next to it stands paraldehyde, a pungent liquid that smells like a cross between wet paint and bad decisions. It's effective but so foul-tasting that most patients gag mid-sip. Still, it knocks you out, and that's what matters. Then there's bromide of potassium, an early favorite for calming nerves and dulling desire. That's right, Victorians used bromides not just for insomnia, but also to dampen unwanted thoughts of the romantic variety. If you were having inappropriate dreams, this was your fix. You wonder how many husbands were secretly dosed with bromide tea just to stop them from writing moony poetry by moonlight. But even among these chemical titans, one name looms largest: laudanum. Ah, laudanum. The melancholic darling of poets and painters, mothers and misfits. A mix of opium and alcohol, often flavored with cinnamon or saffron to make the bitterness go down smooth. It's sold over the counter in pharmacies and even some grocers. You can buy it in bottles adorned with gold leaf. You can also find it in soothing syrup for babies, which, yikes. You try it one night, just a few drops. It's warm going down, like swallowing a sigh. Your thoughts soften. The world fades. Everything feels distant, velvet, and oddly philosophical. You dream in colors. You wake slowly, draped in fog, unsure whether you've slept or just traveled somewhere else entirely. People adore laudanum. It's cheap, it's legal, and it works. The only downside? It's opium. And it's highly habit-forming. You meet people who can no longer sleep without it. One woman at your tea society casually mentions she's been on laudanum for 10 years. Just a little sip before bed, she says, smiling too widely. Her pupils tell a different story. There are stories, rumors, really, of poets who wrote their best verses under its influence, and then wasted away chasing the next dream. One artist claimed laudanum helped him touch the hem of sleep's garment. He died at 32. The paradox of the Victorian sleep drug is this: it gives you rest, but it takes something too. Your edge, your clarity, your mornings. You begin to wonder, is the price worth it? And that's where the fringe thinkers step in again. Not the electro-headgear crowd this time, but the naturalists. They argue that all these tinctures and drops are nothing more than poison in a fancy bottle. You visit one such enthusiast who recommends a concoction of lemon balm, valerian root, and soothing night milk, which turns out to be goat milk warmed with nutmeg. It tastes earnest. And your stomach protests. But you do feel slightly calmer. You're told to drink it while sitting by a flickering oil lamp, staring at a still life of pears. Let the quiet enter through your eyes, she says. You try. You fall asleep eventually. You don't dream of pears, thankfully. There's something poetic about this moment in history. The Victorians are suspended between ancient herb lore and modern pharmacology. They're trying everything: alchemy, chemistry, mythology, all in the pursuit of one simple thing: sleep. And you're right there with them, sipping laudanum with one hand and sniffing lavender with the other, trying to outsmart your own brain. Some nights it works. Some nights you're back where you started, staring at the ceiling and wondering if your soul is vibrating at an unholy frequency. But always, there's hope. In a bottle, in a prayer, in a velvet curtain. Sleep is just out of reach, but not out of sight. And so you reach again. You wake one morning, or is it afternoon, with the sour taste of bromide still clinging to your tongue and a growing suspicion that your sleep is no longer yours. That it's been hijacked. Not by nightmares or guilt this time, but by the very things meant to help. The tinctures are blurring together. The prayers feel like scripts. The laudanum dreams have started to blend into your waking hours. So you make a decision: you're going off everything. Clean break. No chloral, no valerian, no guilt-induced psalms. Instead, you're embracing the newest theories circulating in earnest salons and doctors' clubs across London: insomnia as overstimulation. The idea is as elegant as it is modern-sounding. You can't sleep not because you're sinful or poisoned, but because your nervous system is fried. The Victorian world is too much. Too loud. Too fast. And your fragile human brain wasn't built to process a day's worth of telegrams, train rides, and intense glances over tea. This theory is championed by a growing number of what you might call nerve doctors, precursors to today's neurologists. They speak gravely about nervous exhaustion, neurasthenia, and hysteria, all terms that sound like they belong in a ghost story or an overacted opera. And, honestly, they kind of do. You read a pamphlet titled The Nerves and the Night, a treatise on rest and reason. Its author, Dr. Eliphas Gray, claims that the modern world is devouring the delicate equilibrium of the Victorian mind. He blames gas lamps, telegram machines, railway timetables, and, somewhat confusingly, umbrellas. You must rest the mind to rest the body, he insists. And you must rest the senses to rest the mind. So you begin your journey into sensory management. First up, soundproofing. You tack up heavy velvet curtains around your room. Not for light, though they do help with that, but to muffle sound. You place thick rugs on the floor. You stop the ticking of your clock. You even pay a boy a halfpenny a week to stop whistling outside your window. Then comes light control. Gaslight, while romantic, flickers like a candle with performance anxiety. So you switch to oil lamps with thick shades. Everything becomes dim, sepia-toned, like you're living inside a memory. You eliminate mirrors from your bedroom. Dr. Gray warns they overstimulate the imagination at bedtime. Apparently seeing your own reflection before sleep is like inviting a party guest into your subconscious. You also stop reading newspapers after dusk. Too many headlines. Too much life. You replace them with handwritten poetry, or, when you're desperate, the ever-so-prolific minutes of the Ladies' Civic Improvement League. Sleep by boredom, you reason. A noble death. Then comes the trickiest part, limiting emotional engagement after 6 p.m. That means no arguments, no intense conversations, and absolutely no serialized novels. You try. Truly. But you're halfway through the mystery of Crowswick Hall, and you must know what's behind that third door. Still, you pace yourself. 1 chapter per night, followed by 15 minutes of neutral staring at a fern. Historians still argue whether this movement toward sensory reduction was a medical breakthrough or simply Victorian neurosis in a fancier outfit. Some see it as the start of modern sleep hygiene, others dismiss it as yet another form of societal control, particularly for women, who were often told their nerves couldn't handle excitement at any hour. You do begin to notice something, though. The quieter your evenings become, the easier it is to feel tired. Not drugged. Not guilt-racked. Just, gently frayed at the edges. So you go further. You remove the paintings from your bedroom walls. Too stimulating, apparently. Replace them with a single framed print of a cow in a meadow. You name her Marjorie. Marjorie doesn't ask questions or raise your heart rate. You start bathing at night, another Gray recommended habit. Not a frigid Scottish plunge, but a warm soak with chamomile oil. You light a single candle, close your eyes, and pretend you're a Victorian poetess who just fainted gracefully at a ball. It helps. And then you discover the ultimate tool in the sensory quieting arsenal, monotony. You start repeating the same set of actions every night. Same chair. Same socks. Same teacup. You even place your slippers at exactly the same angle beside the bed. It's all meant to lull your brain into comfort, like tucking a child into a ritual. Over time, you find yourself yawning before you even reach the teacup. It's not magic. It's programming. Victorian style. But this new regime isn't without its skeptics. You attend a salon where one man loudly proclaims that the nervous theory of insomnia is nonsense. What we need is more physical exertion and fewer novels about weeping governesses. He is promptly ignored, then offered a valerian biscuit and politely escorted to the veranda. You smile, sipping your diluted goat's milk and silently thanking Marjorie the cow for her continued emotional neutrality. Still, you can't help but wonder, is all this control simply another form of fear? A way to dominate the night because you're too afraid to let it be wild? You ponder this in the bath one night, fingers tracing lazy spirals on the water's surface. Maybe sleep doesn't come from order or punishment or opium. Maybe it comes from permission. To rest. To let go. To not perform. But you tuck that thought away. Philosophical spirals don't always lead to sleep. Ritual does. Warmth does. Predictability. And maybe Marjorie. So you towel off. Blow out your candle. And whisper your final thought of the night. Less telegrams, more cows. And sleep, blessed, boring, unremarkable sleep, finally comes. Your sensory retreat is working, mostly, but there's always that one nagging question gnawing at the edges of your rest: could there be a mechanical solution? Something outside your own mind and rituals. Maybe a little shock, a little buzz to reset the overloaded Victorian brain. Enter the electrotherapy craze. You've heard whispers about a mysterious new device called the galvanic bed. Sounds like something out of a mad scientist's diary, but it promises a new kind of sleep, scientifically induced, electrically assisted, and perhaps, perfectly painless. You trudge to the clinic where this strange contraption waits. It's a bizarre bed frame wired with copper coils and rubber straps, connected to a box that emits a faint hum and occasional sparks. You recline, wary but curious. A technician gently places electrodes on your wrists and ankles, assuring you it's perfectly safe, except for the occasional tingling sensation. As the current pulses through your limbs, you feel a strange, vibrating warmth, not unpleasant, but definitely new. The machines promise to stimulate the nervous system just enough to tire it out, like rebooting a tired computer. Victorians were obsessed with electricity's mysterious powers, partly because it was so new, partly because it felt like magic, and partly because no one quite understood what it was doing. You try to relax, eyes fluttering. The gentle shock waves seem to lull your mind, and you doze off. But you wake with a slight headache and a tingling sensation that won't quit. You're unsure if you've been healed or mildly electrocuted. The doctor assures you it's normal. You're invited back for more sessions. The machine becomes a nightly ritual for some, a curious fad for others. You discover there's also the phoratic chair, a contraption that jolts your back and shoulders while you sit upright. It's noisy, twitchy, and quite frankly, feels like punishment for your insomnia. Historians still argue whether electrotherapy was a medical breakthrough or just Victorian quackery dressed in wires and leather straps. Some doctors swear by it, others dismiss it as the placebo effect with a shock factor. Despite mixed results, electrotherapy's appeal is obvious, a modern, high-tech answer to sleepless nights that don't respond to prayer or syrup. The craze spreads quickly, influencing even the most skeptical. You find yourself hearing about it at dinner parties and seeing advertisements in newspapers promising to zap your insomnia away. Yet, beneath the science, there's something strangely hopeful about it, this idea that maybe sleep could be engineered, controlled, and perfected through technology. You begin to wonder, if only you could plug yourself in each night, would the electric current finally quiet your restless mind? But the machines are expensive and not without risk. Some patients complain of burns, twitching limbs, or worse, nightmares so vivid they wake gasping. And so, you leave the clinic with mixed feelings, your wrists still tingling, and a new question buzzing in your head. Could electricity be the future of sleep, or just another Victorian dead end? The electric buzz fades into the background as you find yourself drawn to a quieter revolution, the rise of the night nurse. You probably haven't given much thought to these often invisible figures before, but in the labyrinth of Victorian insomnia cures, they are unsung heroes and sometimes a source of fresh frustration. You meet her through a friend, a small woman with sharp eyes and hands that seem to glide rather than grip. She carries a leather satchel filled with tinctures, powders, and a neatly folded nightgown. She's not a doctor, not exactly, but she knows the language of sleep better than most. Night nurses specialize in watching over those who struggle to rest, attending to restless bodies with quiet reassurance and sometimes, stern discipline. They're hired to sit vigil by the bedside, to soothe you through the midnight hours, and gently coax you back to slumber when the mind refuses to settle. Their presence is at once calming and unsettling. You feel less alone in your waking hours, yet the nurse's watchful gaze is a reminder that your nights are a fragile commodity, always at risk of shattering. Some night nurses use aromatherapy, placing bundles of lavender, rosemary, or chamomile near your pillow. The scents waft in gentle waves, intended to lull you to sleep naturally. You find this surprisingly effective, even if the nurse insists on calling it scientific. Others bring peculiar gadgets, tiny feather dusters to gently stroke your temples, or soporific mitts, lined with silk to cool the hands and quiet the nerves. Historians still argue whether night nurses offer true therapeutic relief or simply a social bandage for insomnia's loneliness. Certainly, their work was more than mere comfort, it was an attempt to understand and control the unseen forces that kept so many awake. You start to notice that the nurse's soft humming, often a folk lullaby passed down through generations, has a hypnotic quality. Sometimes, even when your eyes are wide open, you feel your body relaxing, as if carried by a gentle tide. Yet, you also detect a subtle power play. The nurse's job is as much about managing your behavior as your sleep. She keeps strict hours, insists on certain bedtime routines, and gently discourages late-night musings about politics or forbidden romances. There's a quiet tension in this. The nurse is a guardian and a jailer. Her watchfulness ensures your safety but also your compliance. It's a relationship built on trust, yes, but also on the Victorian ideal that the restless mind needs firm but kind restraint. You recall that famous case of a night nurse who reportedly stayed with a wealthy client for months, recording detailed logs of her patients tossing and turning. The nurse's notes became so meticulous they were studied by doctors as part of early sleep research. And yet, some whispered that the nurse had more influence than the doctors themselves, shaping what was seen as normal sleep behavior and punishing those who dared stray. You lie back and imagine the centuries of night nurses before you, each whispering lullabies in different tongues, each inventing new ways to chase away the dark. Some carried ointments and prayers, others, mechanical gadgets or strange herbs. You wonder if the night nurse tradition planted seeds for the modern idea of sleep therapy, combining medical knowledge with gentle, human care. But as your nurse adjusts your pillow and strokes your hair, you feel a deep, soothing gratitude. For tonight, at least, you don't have to face the dark alone. As you sink deeper into this world of Victorian insomnia remedies, you stumble upon a curious and almost poetic paradox: sleep deprivation as a symptom and a spectacle. You realize that insomnia isn't just a private agony, it's also a public performance. The Victorians loved to talk about sleeplessness in salons and newspapers, in novels and plays, as both a personal tragedy and a fashionable affliction. You might say insomnia was the era's weird, nocturnal celebrity. You find yourself leafing through a stack of journals filled with vivid accounts of sleepless nights by famous authors, aristocrats, and doctors. One writer even called insomnia the crown jewel of the nervous elite, a sign you were living life too intensely to rest. The sheer variety of insomnia stories is staggering. Some sufferers describe the night as a cruel, endless void, while others almost revel in the sharp clarity that comes with the witching hour. You imagine them pacing lavish drawing rooms or dimly lit studies, clutching glasses of brandy or swirling cups of tea, their restless minds racing with ideas that refuse to be tamed. You learn that insomnia was sometimes romanticized, a symptom of genius or moral sensitivity, a mark of a restless soul. Writers like Charles Dickens and Emily Dickinson often referenced restless nights, fueling a myth that creative brilliance and sleeplessness were intertwined. Yet, behind the glamour, there's a darker reality. The public fascination with insomnia meant that sufferers were both pitied and envied. Your restlessness could earn you sympathy or suspicion, admiration or dismissal. You read about social rituals built around insomnia, midnight parties for the sleepless, clubs dedicated to discussing dreams and nightmares, and even support groups for those haunted by the dark. And then there's the curious phenomenon of sleepwalking soirees, where aristocrats would gather in their nightclothes to watch, sometimes laugh at, guests who wandered around the mansion in a trance-like state. It was part entertainment, part scientific curiosity. Historians still argue whether this public spectacle of insomnia was empowering or stigmatizing, whether it helped sufferers find community or trapped them in a liminal state between rest and unrest. Your mind drifts to the notion of insomnia as performance. You wonder how much of your own struggle is private pain and how much is shaped by the stories you've heard and the expectations placed on you. Do you wear your insomnia like a badge, or do you hide it like a secret shame? The night deepens, and you feel the weight of all these insomnia tales settling around you, like a thick, velvet cloak. It's comforting and unsettling all at once. You smile wryly, remembering that Victorian mix of science and superstition, and whisper. Who knew sleeplessness could be so fashionable? And with that thought, the edges of your mind begin to blur. The line between reality and myth softens. Finally, sleep starts to seep in. Sleep slips closer, but you're pulled back into the world of Victorian experimentation, where doctors turned their attention to a peculiar contender: hypnotism. Yes, hypnosis, the same mysterious trance state you've seen in modern stage shows, only here it was a serious medical frontier. You settle into a dimly lit Victorian parlor, the air thick with the scent of burning camphor and beeswax. A man in a waistcoat, one of the era's celebrated sleep doctors, invites you to try a hypnotic session to cure your insomnia. You recline in a high-backed chair, eyes half closed, as the doctor's soothing voice begins to weave around you. He speaks of descending stairs, calm rivers, and warm blankets, classic hypnotic imagery meant to slip your mind out of its restless grip. Victorians believed hypnotism could unlock the secrets of the subconscious, quieting the mind's storm through suggestion and guided relaxation. It was hailed as a revolutionary treatment for everything from nervous disorders to sleeplessness. You feel your body relax, eyelids growing heavier as the hypnotist guides you deeper into the trance. Yet, this new technique sparked fierce debate. Some doctors considered hypnotism a cutting-edge medical breakthrough, while others branded it as theatrical nonsense or even dangerous mind control. You overhear whispered rumors of patients who never quite returned from their hypnotic journeys, trapped in altered mental states, or plagued by bizarre post-trance nightmares. Still, many found relief. The hypnotic sessions became a gentle lullaby for the overactive Victorian mind, a way to reset the brain's errant rhythms. You find yourself wondering how much power words hold, the simple act of listening to a calm voice, imagining soothing images, and surrendering control. Historians still argue whether hypnotism's success was due to genuine neurological effects or the placebo power of belief. You recall tales of famous hypnotists who toured the country, blending science, entertainment, and healing. Their dramatic demonstrations often blurred the line between medicine and spectacle. Your own experience is quiet and private, a few moments of calm before the sleep takes hold. As you drift off, you imagine the hypnotist's voice continuing like a soft river through your dreams, carrying you gently toward rest. And in the back of your mind, you wonder if this strange, old technique might still hold secrets we've yet to rediscover. Just as you begin to trust hypnotism as a savior, you find yourself pulled into another curious corner of Victorian insomnia remedies, the role of diet and digestion. It turns out, your sleepless nights might just be a rebellious gut throwing a tantrum. You picture a dim kitchen where ladies in corsets debate the merits of warm milk versus brandy, honey versus plain water. Victorian doctors posited that indigestion was a major culprit behind restless nights. Too much rich food, or eating too late, could send your stomach into rebellion, keeping your brain buzzing long after the table was cleared. You remember the famous egg and wine cure, a warm, rich concoction believed to soothe nerves and promote deep sleep. It was as much about indulgence as medicine, a kind of liquid lullaby. Yet, other experts preached strict moderation, advocating light dinners and herbal teas. The Victorians were obsessed with the delicate balance between nourishment and overindulgence. You feel your mouth watering imagining the smells, fresh bread, spiced puddings, the sharp tang of vinegar in pickled things. All tantalizing, yet possibly your enemy in the quest for rest. Historians still argue whether Victorian dietary advice was genuinely effective or simply moralistic, punishing indulgence under the guise of medical science. A quirky fact floats to the surface: some believe that eating pickled cucumber at bedtime would calm the nerves, thanks to its mysterious, cooling properties. You chuckle softly, wondering if it might just give you heartburn instead. You recall that Victorian cookbooks sometimes included recipes specifically designed to aid sleep: gentle porridges infused with lavender, custards enriched with valerian root, and broths thickened with barley. Your mind drifts to the less glamorous side: stomach troubles, bloating, and the frequent Victorian reliance on laxatives and purgatives to cleanse the body, which might have only made matters worse. You realize that the gut-brain connection, so hotly studied today, was just beginning to be glimpsed back then, even if it was wrapped in mysticism and anecdote. Your thoughts wander to the late-night snacks you might reach for now: chips, soda, coffee, and you feel a pang of gratitude for modern nutrition science. But the Victorian obsession with diet and digestion as keys to sleep reveals a timeless truth: that rest is as much about the body's rhythms as the mind's. You ease back into your pillow, feeling a little more respect for the simple power of a well-timed supper. You find yourself drifting further into the Victorian bedroom, but now it's not just about cures, it's about the bed itself, a surprisingly complex character in the sleep story. After all, the Victorians believed your mattress could be your best friend or your worst enemy when it came to rest. Picture a grand four-poster, heavy drapes pulled closed against the chill, the room lit only by a flickering candle. You sink into a mattress stuffed with straw, feathers, or even coiled springs, an innovation only recently invented in the mid-1800s. You feel the firmness beneath you, not quite the soft cloud your modern body craves, but supportive enough to cradle you into submission. The bed was more than a piece of furniture, it was a fortress against drafts, a stage for nightly rituals, and sometimes, a source of dread. Bed bugs were a notorious Victorian nemesis, feasting in the dark and leaving itchy reminders that sleep was not always a refuge. To combat this, some families used herbal sachets tucked into the mattress or under pillows, filled with lavender, rosemary, or pennyroyal, believed to ward off pests and evil spirits alike. The fabric and design of bedding were a subject of great debate. Wool was praised for warmth, while linen was said to breathe better, keeping the sleeper cool and dry. Historians still argue whether the layering of sheets and blankets improved comfort or simply trapped heat and moisture, sometimes making insomnia worse. You even learn of curious Victorian bed inventions, like the bed cradle, a metal frame placed over the legs to keep heavy blankets off the feet, recommended for those who suffered from gout or restless legs. It's funny to think that some beds came equipped with bells so servants could be summoned from the next room, a reminder that sleep, especially for the wealthy, was often a communal affair, not a solitary escape. You chuckle softly imagining a nervous servant tiptoeing in the dark, summoned at odd hours by an anxious master unable to sleep. But perhaps the most fascinating Victorian belief was that the bed itself could be an agent of health or disease. Some doctors warned that stale mattresses could harbor miasmas, or bad air thought to cause illness. Regular airing and even beating the mattress became a household ritual, almost a form of cleansing. You reflect on how much we take our beds for granted now, a simple mattress, pillows, blankets. But for the Victorians, the bed was a battleground, a place where comfort, science, superstition, and fear all tangled together. As you nestle into your imaginary Victorian bed, you feel the centuries of restless sleepers before you, all hoping for just one good night. And maybe tonight, the bed will finally be on your side. The shadows lengthen as you realize there's one more unexpected battlefront in the Victorian war against insomnia, the role of social expectations and gender. Sleep, it seems, wasn't just about rest, it was wrapped in the tightly woven fabric of Victorian society's rules and hierarchies. You picture yourself in a parlor filled with women in corsets and men in starched collars, each carrying their own burdens of sleeplessness, though not always for the same reasons. Women, in particular, faced a curious dilemma. Victorian medical opinion often attributed female insomnia to hysteria, a catch-all diagnosis for nervousness, anxiety, and emotional distress. You imagine a doctor's office where a frail woman is told her restless nights are the result of an overactive womb or an unsettled spirit. This diagnosis often led to treatments that were equal parts baffling and invasive: rest cures, confinement, and even electrical shock therapy. At the same time, women were expected to maintain the household and family, roles that left little room for actual rest. You can almost hear the whispered social admonishments: "Why can't you sleep? You must be strong for your family." Men, on the other hand, wrestled with insomnia tied to work pressures, social standing, and the burden of being the family's breadwinner. The Victorian ideal of the stoic, tireless man left little tolerance for complaining about sleeplessness. Historians still argue whether Victorian attitudes toward insomnia reinforced harmful gender stereotypes or if they reflected genuine differences in experience. You come across accounts of men who disguised their exhaustion with alcohol or tobacco, while women quietly endured restlessness in the shadowed corners of their bedrooms. A quirky, almost tragic detail emerges: some Victorian men were advised to use crocodile dung plasters on their temples to calm the nerves. You shudder and laugh softly, wondering if that's why the crocodile sunscreen was so popular in earlier times. You reflect on how social expectations shaped who sought treatment, what kind, and how insomnia was talked about, or silenced. In many ways, Victorian sleep struggles mirror our own, where stress, identity, and societal pressures intertwine with the biology of rest. As you let these thoughts settle, you feel the comforting realization that no matter the century, the human struggle to find peaceful sleep remains a deeply personal yet universally shared experience. And you, dear listener, are part of that long, sleepless lineage. As your mind wanders through the labyrinth of Victorian insomnia remedies and cultural tales, one last theme emerges: the rise of modern sleep science amid lingering Victorian shadows. You imagine yourself stepping into a bustling late 19th century laboratory, filled with ticking clocks, flickering gas lamps, and rows of curious contraptions designed to measure the elusive quality of sleep. Victorians were among the first to try to capture sleep in numbers, pulse rates, breathing patterns, and brain waves, though their tools were rudimentary by today's standards. You learn about pioneering researchers who recorded their own sleepless nights, using journals and devices like the kymograph, hoping to understand why sleep was so often disturbed. Yet, their interpretations were often colored by the era's mix of science and superstition. Some believed that sleep was controlled by a delicate balance of nervous fluids, a now-defunct concept that linked the body's invisible energies to rest and wakefulness. The age also saw the birth of the sleep clinic, where patients could be studied overnight, sometimes even hooked up to early EEG machines. You imagine Victorian patients lying still, while doctors observed them through one-way mirrors, noting every twitch, sigh, or restless movement. This was the dawn of a new, empirical approach, but historians still argue how much these early studies truly advanced understanding versus reinforcing pre-existing biases. A quirky footnote appears in the form of a popular gadget called the sleep-inducing machine, a contraption involving spinning discs and hypnotic lights, an ancestor of modern white noise machines and sleep apps. Victorians also grappled with the paradox of technology's role in sleep. Gas lighting extended the waking day but disrupted natural rhythms, while new machines promised rest yet often delivered only confusion. You reflect on how the Victorian obsession with controlling and measuring sleep laid the groundwork for today's booming sleep science industry. And as you let your eyes close gently, you appreciate that the quest for restful sleep, so earnest, flawed, and fascinating, continues to this day. The night stretches before you, inviting you into dreams shaped by centuries of curiosity, hope, and restless minds. You smile quietly, knowing that while science may change, the desire to drift peacefully into sleep is timeless. Now, as the night deepens around you, feel the soft ebb of your breath syncing with the slow pulse of history's heartbeat. Imagine the warm glow of candlelight fading gently into the quiet darkness, and the faint rustle of heavy drapes settling into stillness. All those restless nights of the past, filled with strange cures and whispered fears, dissolve softly into the silence that holds you now. You are part of a long, winding story, one where human minds, bodies, and hearts have sought peace beneath the stars and beyond the ticking clock. Let your thoughts drift like the slow turning of an ancient page, each moment easing you closer to calm. The worries of the day fall away, replaced by the gentle hum of time's quiet march. Tonight, you are safe in this shared sleep, cradled by the kindness of centuries and the promise of morning light. So breathe slowly, deeply, and let your mind float free. Good night, dear listener. Sweet dreams.